After Dark show for April 6th, 2023. We're going to be talking about fantasy football ADP, TV shows, and whatnot, also breaking down the news. We're going to have a Masters preview, so I'm excited for that. Joined by Kenny, former co-host of the WalterFootball.com podcast, at Fantasy Jabber, the man, the myth, the legend, vice president of the First Men and the Andals. Kenny, how are you?
I'm fantastic. That intro just gets better every time. It just keeps getting longer, more titles added. Like I'm in Westeros or something. This is fantastic.
Well, hopefully there's not a bad ending for you like in Westeros, and hopefully I don't spoil or like break any more of your personal plans on the show like I did last time. Still feel bad about that.
No worries.
I had no idea. All right, we're gonna get into that. So I'm looking forward to talking about that with you. Before we do, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. As you can see, I am wearing a free Gruden Walter football t-shirt. Actually, it's the same one that Charlie was wearing on our show a couple weeks ago. Actually, the exact same one. Charlie sent it to me so I can wear it on the show. All right. Let's get into this. Let's talk about the news first. Only a few stories here to break down. It's kind of a mild one. The interest in John Michael Schmitz from the Giants is real. So it sounds like the Giants may go after a center at number 25 in the draft. Which kind of makes sense because they don't actually have a center on their roster right now. I was actually like looking at it, like they don't have a center. So I feel like they probably will go after a center at some point. I think this one's more interesting. The Ravens, their GM said that there's a chance they might take a quarterback in the first round. You might be thinking like, is that like Hendon Hooker at 22? It could be Anthony Richardson at 4, or maybe even Will Levis at 4. If they trade Lamar Jackson to the Colts. So that's something to look out for as well. And one more story. The Patriots are considering adding a blue chip running back in the draft. Might be surprising for those who like Ramondre Stevenson a lot. I like Stevenson quite a bit. But he fumbled a lot last year. Damian Harris is gone. I get wanting to add a running back like a second day or maybe round 4. I just think it would be a big mistake to add Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round because like it's like what we talked about 2 weeks ago, Kenny, where like a contender could add a running back in the first round. It would make sense, but the Patriots are definitely not a contender. In fact, I think they're the worst team in the division, so I think that would be a mistake. So any of those stories like come at like make you think about something, or like what are your thoughts on any of these?
I would say, from a fantasy perspective, if the Patriots were to draft a running back high, that would be a bummer because I'm in that camp of guys that really like Stevenson and expect him to take a decent step forward. I don't think he's an elite player, but I think he's a really good player and has a chance to really kind of take a step forward. So I think you could put me you could count me amongst those people that would be that would cause some confusion to the backfield there. But the biggest story here that you've highlighted is Lamar Jackson and what the Ravens are thinking at quarterback. I don't know. This feels like totally a botched job, but from both sides. I feel like the Ravens have totally mismanaged this, but I also feel like Lamar Jackson has totally mismanaged his own situation. Like it's hard to look at either side and think that either side is righteous in this debacle. And so I'm like, I think Lamar Jackson has misplayed his hand and kind of misunderstood the market. But the Ravens, like, how do you let your franchise quarterback get to this point where he's at odds with you and there's this confusion? It just seems like total mismanagement on both sides. And it feels like the breakup is coming, right? It feels like this kind of rumor is the kind of rumor that seems to me someone in the Ravens front office is leaking this, not because they actually intend to do what the rumor says, but they kind of want to gauge what their fan base is thinking. Like teams will do that sometimes. They're like, they'll leak something just to see how their fan base will react to it. This kind of smells like that, right? It kind of feels like that sort of scenario. They're trying to start to prep their fan base for the inevitable breakup. And so maybe the rumor itself is not as big a deal as much of it's the big deal is Lamar Jackson is probably going to be playing somewhere else in 2023. And I find it very odd that the Ravens allowed it to get to this point.
So, what would you do if you're the Ravens? So Jackson said that the Ravens, or at least I don't want to say reportedly because he said it. He said that the Ravens offered him a contract that was 3 years, 133 million, fully guaranteed, and he turned it down. He wants as much guaranteed money. He wants more guaranteed money than Deshaun Watson. So, like, if you're the Ravens, what do you do about that?
You have to move on at this point. I mean, you would have hoped you would have been able to convince him, hey, just because the Browns did something doesn't mean we are now tethered to that contract. It's not how it works necessarily. Like, one team doing something that everyone else thinks is outlandish doesn't mean we're obligated to do that. And so I just don't know if any team's going to be willing to trade for him. Like, because if that's his contract demands, are the Colts going to be willing to do that? I was thinking the Raiders would have been a type of team that would have been in on Lamar Jackson a few weeks ago before the offseason. But is there a team willing? I mean, I thought maybe would the Dolphins be willing to move on from Tua? Do they think Lamar Jackson is an upgrade? Like, what team is willing to spend that kind of money on him? It feels like probably none. And so if I'm the Ravens, I'm trying to trade him, but I don't know that there's going to be trade partners that are lining up to give away draft capital and hand over the contract he's looking for.
I think the Colts make the most sense. Not only do they need a quarterback, and not only do they have the 4th overall pick, they also have the 7th most cap space in the NFL. So it seems like that's like the perfect storm. Whereas like other teams would like, I heard the Vikings as a possibility, and I'm like, where are the Vikings going to get the cap space for that? Like, they have no salary cap. And I know, like, a couple weeks ago you talked about how fraudulent the salary cap was, but still, I think it would be kind of difficult. I guess like moving Kirk Cousins would be part of that deal, but it just feels like the Colts are the most realistic to me. Just based on their need, and like if they don't like Richardson or Will Levis very much, it's like what do they do now? Just hope that the Texans pass on one of the quarterbacks. Like, I think that would be I don't think that's likely, even though I guess we can't count out Houston doing something stupid.
Yeah. At the end of the day, like in the NFL, if you don't have a quality quarterback, you can't win. That's the bottom line. You don't need to have Patrick Mahomes necessarily, although that certainly helps. Obviously,
Yeah.
You don't need to have the best quarterback in the game or even a top 3, but you need a guy who can consistently play top 10 style quarterback in the NFL, and a guy who doesn't make mistakes in big moments. Like, that's ultimately what you need in the NFL. And if you don't have that, you can't win. And so Lamar Jackson has got flaws. No doubt he's not a perfect quarterback. And there's still debate as to whether or not you can win a championship with that style of game. Although Jalen Hurts' game is not too different in some ways, and he came really close. So, maybe there's an argument to be said that that's already been proven. But I think at the end of the day, like, you got to get this guy. You need a quarterback, right? You need someone who can do it, and you got to be willing to take a chance. So even if you don't love one of those two guys, I think it's willing to take a shot. I think at the end of the day, I have no problem with teams that are willing to take a shot at a quarterback in the top 10. And if you suck for 2-3 years because this guy's being a bust, well, you'll be back right up there in a couple of years, and you'll do it again. And you keep trying to get one of them, because without it, you can't compete.
Or you could just do it the following year, like the Cardinals did. Remember, they drafted Josh Rosen, number 10, and then they drafted Kyler Murray, number 1. Like, things are so much different now than they were, before the lockout, or almost lockout in 2010, where they had new contracts for the rookie quarterbacks.
Right.
Like pre 2010, like, you could not do that because you'd have this huge part of your cap space dedicated to a rookie quarterback. Now those contracts are so much smaller that teams can definitely just go back-to-back quarterbacks if the first one doesn't work out.
Remember Jamarcus Russell got this. Whatever, $78 million guaranteed in 2007, right? So I don't even know what with inflation what that would be today. But side note, I accidentally unplugged my computer as I was talking to you here. So if you hear me making noises, it's me trying to replug my computer because I'm dope. Anyway. Yeah, you could never pull that off. Side note, the Arizona Cardinals drafting Josh Rosen number 10, and then the next year just saying, "Hey, we effed up. Let's just move on." like on one hand, you're like, "Dude, you guys are idiots." On the other hand, you're like, "Well, I kind of respect that you guys acknowledged it and moved on. Like rather than trying to force Rosen for the next 2 or 3 seasons, you realize, listen, we screwed this up. Let's just move on now. Let's cut our losses. I kind of respect that to some extent.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, like, why compound mistakes? Like, you made a mistake with Rosen. Like, you're not going to make another mistake by passing on Murray. Although they would have gotten Nick Bosa, which is, you can't go wrong there, I guess. But still, they wouldn't have had a quarterback. I don't know. In 2020, I guess they would have been terrible. So they would have. Who knows? Maybe that was the mistake. Maybe they should have waited for Joe Burrow. Not that they knew who Burrow was heading into the 2020 season, because he was kind of like an afterthought. Like, he just came on that year and just came out of nowhere. I guess like Tua was like the top prospect back then. So maybe they thought, hey, we could draft Nick Bosa and then wait on Tua for a year. I guess that's a possibility. But I want to bring up one more story for you and get your opinion on this. This is from Peter King. The Texans could pass on a quarterback at number 2 overall, which I think would be so stupid. This is a franchise that has made so many bad decisions. They had 4 pillars of the franchise. They had DeAndre Hopkins that traded for him for a second, and David Johnson. They had J.J. Watt, who just left. They had Davian Clowney, traded him for what was it, a third overall pick, and then third round pick, and then they had Deshaun Watson, and we saw what happened with him. So like, they basically like dismantled their franchise. And as dumb as those decisions were, I think passing on one of CJ Stroud or Bryce Young would be probably the dumbest, in my opinion. What do you think?
I don't believe that report at all. I don't. There are a lot of dumb NFL teams. There's a lot of dumb NFL executives over the years. There's a lot of decisions that we look back and go, man, that was really stupid. I don't believe that team is that dumb. Now, maybe in a month we'll be looking back and going, wow, they were dumber than I thought. I mean, that has happened before. I don't believe that. That's the kind of report that's just maybe they like 3 of the 4 quarterbacks and they're willing to slide down a couple spots, and they think they can still get a guy they really like, and they're just trying to drum up trade requests, or maybe they're just doing that as a means of trying to. I don't even know what the advantage would be. I don't believe it. Or maybe it's someone else trying to drum up. Maybe it's an agent leaking something, trying to drum up, interest in one of his players. I don't know. I hear those requests and I just think, I hear those kind of rumors. I can't believe that's true. Like, they can't be that dumb, can they?
No, I don't know. Like, I think it's the Texans, man. They've done so many stupid things. The one possibility is like, maybe they're trying to trick the Cardinals. It's like, hey, Cardinals, you can't trade down because no one wants these other 2 crappy quarterbacks. We know you guys really want Will Anderson, and someone might trade up for Will. We might take Will Anderson. Why don't we swap 2 and 3? Maybe that's the case, because I think it would be so stupid to pass on one of those quarterbacks otherwise. Just doesn't make any sense. Like, Lance Zerline, I don't know how to say his name, but he works for NFL Network, and he published a mock draft with this information. I believe he's from Houston too, so he might have some inside information or something. But in his mock, he had the Lions taking a quarterback, the Panthers taking a quarterback, and then he had the Texans drafting Tyree Wilson, number 2 overall. Not even Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, number 2. And then at 12, he had the Texans taking Will Levis, which I would just like I don't even know what's worse than Millen. Like, that would be an all-time like worst grade for me for a team.
The quarterbacks are just they're such a crapshoot to me. Some of these guys. So I don't know. You know more than I do. What's the gap between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young and the other guys? Like, what's the chasm between those guys? Is it substantial enough where that is ridiculous? And it sounds like you're saying.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, Stroud and Young are, I think, blue chip prospects. Whereas Richardson and Levis both have big upside, but they both have like glaring flaws in their game. Like, Richardson could at least make up for it with his athleticism. Like, he ran a 4.4 at the combine, which is just as fast as Justin Fields ran. And we saw what Fields was capable of last year. Like, even if Richardson never develops as a passer, he has a really good arm, just his accuracy is off. he could at least run around and cause chaos like Fields did last year. Whereas Levis has he has accuracy issues too, and like he has no touch on his passes. He's like McNabb trying to throw like screens.
Oh gosh, I just had a flashback. Sorry.
I knew you'd get that. Yeah, he has no touch at all. So he has some like even worse flaws, and he doesn't have the 4.4 speed to make up for it. So it would be a big downgrade in my opinion. And like, I mean, who knows? Maybe he defies the odds and becomes a great quarterback. But he reminds me of I'd say he reminds me of Blake Bortles.
That's not a good comparison.
No, it's not. But to his credit, Bortles had that one great year with Greg Olson as his offensive coordinator, and then when Olson left, it all fell apart for him. So maybe we'll also have one great fantasy year. So I could see that happening.
Man, that guy Blake Bortles was so bad. Gosh, he was so terrible. He had so many bad. Anyway, that's. Bad stuff.
Yeah, he was horrible. We had a quick question here from Lion King. Do you think we could move up to grab a quarterback? I mean, if you like, the Lions had a fantastic trade last year where they moved up from 32 to 12 to get Jameson Williams, and they gave up almost nothing. If they can move up to 2 and get Stroud or Young and like give up almost nothing again, then I think you do it. I don't think that's very likely. So I think the Lions most likely go with one of Tyree Wilson, Christian Gonzalez, or Bijan Robinson at 6. I don't think they go quarterback. I mean, the Lions are ready to win now. Like they have such a great roster. I don't know. I don't know about what you think about this, Kenny, but Jacob and I both love the Lions this year, and we think they're a top 3 team in the NFC, along with the Eagles and the 49ers. I don't know what you think about that. I don't think I talked to you about the Lions.
I think their roster overall feels really good. I guess at the end of the day, I still don't believe in the quarterback. I think Goff is still pretty. I think there's significant limits to his game. At the end of the day, that limits your team. So I think there's kind of 2 tiers. I think it's the Niners and the Eagles. And I think you can make an argument for either one of those at number 1. I think there's a gap, and then there's a tier. And I think there's 3 or 4 teams in that tier, and the Lions are probably in that second tier, in my opinion. I haven't really thought through it thoroughly, which teams I think are most likely to be in that tier. I guess the Cowboys might be in that tier as well. But yeah, I think the Lions has as much of a case as anybody in that tier.
Yeah, I mean, they were 8-2 to close out the year. One of their losses was a nail biter against the Bills on Thanksgiving when the Bills still had Von Miller. The other loss is like they got tripped up against Carolina because Carolina ran this like zone read option like offense that like they just were not prepared for. But they won every other game, and they crushed like some teams that made the playoffs. They beat the Vikings by double digits. They destroyed the Giants. I believe they destroyed the Jaguars. Like they went on a tear, and then they beat the Packers at the end of the year. It was just an overtime away because that Rams Seahawks game went to overtime at the end. Really wanted to see the Lions, not just because I had them to make the playoffs. I had them at I forget what it was. Like I had them for like 6-1 odds or 8-1 odds. Maybe it was like 10-1 odds to make the playoffs. And they almost got there. It kind of sucked that they didn't. I will say this about Jared Goff though. Like I agree with you about like not being high on Goff. Like I'm not a big Goff guy, but he did take the Rams to the Super Bowl. So it is possible. And the NFC is not strong. Like it's right. Eagles, Niners. And then you're right. Like there is a bit of a gap, even though I actually would say like it's not that big of a gap because the Eagles lost some players and the Niners may not have a healthy quarterback to start the year. So I think it's pretty close, tier 1 to tier 2 in the NFC.
Obviously the draft will make a difference. I mean, it's possible that the draft will, at this time last year, the Eagles had not added AJ Brown, which turned out to be a pretty substantial addition. So draft day has a way of shifting the scales. The Lions trading up to go to quarterback, it feels like, hey, you've got the draft capital and you're in the position to do it. If you don't believe in Jared Goff as your guy, for the next 5 years, like you've got 4 guys in this draft that everyone's touting as top 10 guys or top 12. this would be the moment. But again, as you said, if there's a significant gap between the top two guys and the next two guys, maybe the Lions are looking at those other two guys saying they're not worth the trade.
Yeah, and they have 6 and 18, so they can definitely add a lot of talent.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, let's move on to our Masters preview. I bet Brooks Koepka to win the Masters at 40-1, and that's it for our Masters preview. Unless you had something to add, Kenny.
Is Bubba Watson playing? Is he still a golfer? No.
I don't see. I remember seeing his name. But I heard I won't say who this is. It's a known person in the golf space, so like maybe everyone listening to this doesn't know them. But he really likes Koepka to win. And Koepka's like 40-1 or something. So I bet it. So that's what I did. So if anyone wants to follow, that's what I'm doing.
Nice.
All right.
Is Tiger Woods still a golfer? Is he?
He's in the Masters, but he's apparently terrible. Yeah. So do not bet Tiger Woods. If you could fade him, definitely do that. Yeah. Excellent. So anyway, all right. So we're going to talk about fantasy football ADP. The 2023 early ADP is out, and I was kind of shocked by some of the names at the top of the list, including the number one guy. And I told you before we started recording, I was surprised by who the number one guy was, and you said you would try to guess who it was. So I wonder if you came up with a name, and then we'll reveal it.
In standard versus PPR, I guess it might be different, right?
Okay. I don't know if this is standard or PPR. I think that's probably standard, but
yeah. My guesstimate, very early PPR or ADP in standard, my guesstimate is I bet Christian McCaffrey might still be. I think a lot of people he still had a very productive season. I think I had the stats from last year I pulled up a moment ago. Christian McCaffrey finished as a number 2 overall fantasy running back in standard leagues, typical standard scoring. I think a lot of people are going to look at him and think my guesstimate is in standard leagues, it would be Christian McCaffrey.
Okay. Well, let's reveal the list. It is Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson at number 1.
I know. I was shocked.
Okay. McCaffrey's number 2 there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In standard, that's very surprising to me. In PPR, well, I'm still never I'm not taking a wide receiver over number 1 overall unless the rules just really demand that. But I guess, I'm not totally shocked that Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase would be at the top. Justin Jefferson would likely be my number 1 receiver going. I haven't done ranks. It's way too early to do ranks, but my guess is that Justin Jefferson will probably be my number 1. I think, maybe Jefferson and Jamar Chase, AJ Brown are probably going to be my top 3 going there. I mean, AJ Brown there is number 12 ADP on that list you've got there overall. So that's probably about right. I'm just, but he'll probably be my top 3 wide receivers, but we'll see. I'm way too early.
It is way too early. A lot's going to change with the draft and everything. And I like that we have the same like thought process there. We're both boomers who were playing fantasy football in the 90s, like before the internet. And like, I don't know how it was with you, but when I first started playing, I used to have to call in my lineup, and I wouldn't know who won until school the next day. Like it's crazy how things have changed. And like the thought
I used to calculate with the newspaper. I was a commissioner.
That's what we did at lunch on Monday, because we're all in the same school. Like people would gather around the guy who had the newspaper and be like, here's the totals, and like people would like double check the math, and that's how we knew. No one knew if they won their fantasy lineup until then. Like I didn't even know who my opponent was playing. Like it was just it was so weird. It's so streamlined now. And like the thought of taking a receiver number 1 back then was insane. Like, and this was a time when Jerry Rice was in the NFL. And I actually had Jerry Rice on my fantasy team. Like the year that he missed most of it with an injury, or maybe all of it with an injury, that's when I had Jerry Rice, unfortunately. But like Justin Jefferson is an amazing player. And so when I first saw this, I'm like, come on, receiver number 1, that's insane. Like, why would anyone do that? And then I thought about it. It's like, man, like these running backs are just so underwhelming these days. Like even McCaffrey, of course, of course you'd love to have McCaffrey on your team, but still, like there were some games last year where he was just not on the field in the second half because like the Niners just had a big lead and they're like, all right, let's run the other guys, and like McCaffrey would end up with like 15 touches that game, and it was so frustrating. Even if you had him in DraftKings or something, like that happened a lot. So maybe that's the reason why he's not going number one. Again, I would still love to have him, but like there is definitely downside with every single running back. Austin Eckler is your number 2 running back. He may not even be on the Chargers because he may be traded. And I know you're not a big fan of Eckler as a runner. I'm not a big Eckler runner guy either. He's an amazing pass catcher, but still. And I think it's insane that you only have 2 running backs in the top 7.
That is insane. Eckler finishes the 4th scoring fantasy option at the running back position in standard leagues last year. So, I got to give him credit there. And he's really turned out to be, he's really overachieved in my opinion. He's really a much better player than what his talent would seem to dictate he could be. So I give him credit there. Yeah, but there seems to be a pretty significant drop. There seems to be, and I don't know if this will hold. Maybe we'll get to August and this will shift. But if I'm going into August and I'm going into my typical leagues, I'm in the 4 leagues in which I've been in for several years. If I'm drafting and this is the landscape, I'm going to be very excited to be drafting running backs. If this is the landscape, I want to be drafting late first round. I'd love to be late first round because maybe one of those better running backs is going to fall to me. And maybe a guy like Austin Eckler falls to me. And maybe I can get a Bijan Robinson running behind the stellar Eagles offensive line. Sorry. One can dream. Anyway, I think this is an interesting landscape. Again, we said it's super early, but if this remains the case, I'd be really excited to be drafting later in the first round rather than early.
Yeah, me too. I was actually going to ask you about Robinson. What do you think about him being number 9? Obviously, we don't know where he's going to be playing next year. You mentioned the Eagles. I think there's a good chance he goes there. I think he'll likely be on the Eagles or Lions, and both those teams have great offensive lines. So, like, let's assume that he goes to one of those teams. Do you think 9 is fair for a rookie?
For a typical rookie, no. That seems unwise. But Robinson is the kind of guy that he's an elite talent, and we've seen the type of guys that have come out recently that are like him in terms of his elite ability. We saw Zeke come out year 1 gangbusters in his first 2 years, and Saquon as well. Now Saquon's been injured, and so that's impacted his his quality. But there is no doubt in before Saquon's injuries, I mean, he was electric, right? He's unbelievable. And he still has, there's still a lot of moments where he's that good. But man, I think Bijan Robinson is probably going to be in that sort of category from day one. If he's running behind a great offensive line, I mean, if he's on the Eagles, I think all the sports books in Vegas will take offensive rookie off the board. They'll just stop letting people bet that. Because it'll just they won't. But just right. I mean, he'll be like negative 1,000 or something. Minus it'll be crazy because I think he would be if he's running on the Lions. I mean, there are probably some other teams that you would say, man, if he's on that team, he's going to be unbelievable. 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns year 1, and 60 catches, something like that. I think he could be that kind of guy year 1.
Yeah, I think first glance I was like, wow, 9. I thought I could maybe get him in the second round. But the more I think about it, the more it makes sense, and the more I think about it, I feel like he could even be higher. Wouldn't surprise me if he ends the year as like the number 1 running back. No, I wouldn't bet that to happen. I think it's still going to be McCaffrey, but he has that sort of talent, and if he's on the Eagles or Lions, like he's going to be in position to score a lot of touchdowns and just run through like huge holes because both, like I said, both teams have great offensive lines. If you were to let's look at the top 12, so like the first round of those players, if you were to say like I do not want this player. I think he's going to be a bust this year because, I mean, there are multiple busts in the first round every single year. Just kind of tough to identify them. Like, who would you say that would be out of these top 12?
I'm going to ignore tight end and quarterback because I never draft those guys early.
Right.
So I'm going to put that aside. They're never worth the value there. So they're a bust from a value standpoint, but that's a different conversation. I'm looking here. It's going to pain me to say this because I really love the player. I think the guy that makes me most nervous is probably Stephon Diggs. I get fifth overall. I mean, that feels very high. So again, Stephon Diggs he's a great player. The Bills have been a great team. He's produced a lot of fantasy relevant. He's been fantasy relevant in a significant way. I could see the Bills taking a little bit of a step back this year offensively. Not a huge step, but slight, just enough where, for a receiver to return top 5 value, he's got to be awesome. He's got to be great every single week. I'm very confident that Justin Jefferson would be great every single week. I'm confident that Jamar Chase, who's currently at ADP 3, I'm very confident. Of these guys, the guy I'm least confident in to return top 5, top 10 value is probably Stephon Diggs. I still think he could be a great player. I think he could, catch 80 balls and have 1,000 yards plus. But I think he could easily finish, 10, 12, 15, 17, and that'd still be a good season. To draft him 5th overall in the mid first round and to get mid second round value is it would be terrible.
I could see that. I want to give you 2 names. I think Jonathan Taylor is someone I would not touch in the first round. I mean, he has great talent. Like, don't get me wrong, but I don't like the situation with the Colts. They have their offensive line is not nearly as good as it was a couple years ago. And also, they're going to have a rookie quarterback on their center in all likelihood. Now, maybe they trade for Lamar Jackson, but let's just say they draft either Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. You're going to have a raw quarterback on their center, and teams are not going to respect the pass as much as they did even a couple years ago. So I think that Taylor could be in for another rough season. Like he wasn't that great last year before he got hurt. Like he was fine. Like he just wasn't worth like the top pick that teams the fantasy players were drafting him at. So I think I would draft like Taylor like end of second round, not end of first round. I think this is too early. And I love Cooper Kupp. So don't get me wrong here. My concern is with Matthew Stafford, who had like a really bad elbow injury last year. Stafford's going to be back, but you just don't know. I mean, he's an old player. He might be worn down. And Cooper Kupp before Stafford, he was a good fantasy player, but he was not a first round pick. He was like Kupp was going like 4th round under Goff, right? He was going like 4th, 5th, 3rd, 4th, 5th round somewhere in that area with Jared Goff. If like Stafford's banged up and not himself, or if they have to go to another quarterback, and by the way, they don't have another quarterback on the roster right now. I think Cooper Kupp could be in for a bust season, even though it wouldn't be his fault.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. Once you said it, I'm like, yeah, that probably of the guys in the top 10, top 12 region, he's probably more risky than Stephon Diggs, mostly because of the situation there. Yeah, that could blow up. But I also think there's upside there, right? We've seen Cooper Kupp just be this unbelievable player. The year they won the Super Bowl, I mean, he was just unreal, right? I mean, I think you could have made a case that he was the MVP, at least the offensive player in the NFL that year. He was so good. So, yeah, but I think that's a good one in terms of thinking about potential risk there. I'm looking at the top 36. I was saying you just said the first 10, so I started looking kind of down the list as well. Are there other names kind of in that region, in this region that stand out to you?
Well, first of all, I love Tony Pollard at 26. I think that's too late for him. We'll see what the Cowboys do in the draft. I don't think they'll take a running back in the first round. I don't expect Bijan Robinson to be available that late. I think that'd be insane. Jahmyr Gibbs might get there, but I don't think the Cowboys would take him. I think they're going to go running back on day 2 to replace Elliott. But I still think Pollard is going to be the main running back. But I think this is too late for Pollard. Like I would consider him late first round. Like I think he's going to have an amazing season. Um, so like yeah, DeAndre Hopkins at 36. We just don't know where he's going to go. Like there are rumors that the Patriots could trade for him, and if so, that would just kill his fantasy value. Just because they're a run first team. And Hopkins, he hasn't been able to stay on the field for the most of the season for the past couple years. I know he had a suspension last year, but he got hurt at the end of the year. He missed, I think it was like 9 games the year before that. So there's and he's like 31 now. So I think that's kind of like paying on past production in the third round. Now, if he goes to a team that has like a great offense, like I don't even know, like I can't even think of a team with a good offense that could trade for him at this point. But like theoretically, if he goes to a team with like a really good quarterback, like the Bills,
Chiefs.
for example, Chiefs, right? Okay, there you go. If he goes to the Chiefs or the Bills, then yeah, absolutely, I would love him. I just don't. I would just have concern with him if he goes to like the Patriots or something. So that's someone I wouldn't really like. I guess like I think this is a little early for Devontae Adams. I mean, it's a brand new quarterback, and it's like he's always had Aaron Rodgers or his college quarterback throwing to him. And this is gonna be Garoppolo, and I still like him. I just think second round. I think it's too early for Adams. Like I'd be comfortable with him in the third round, but with Garoppolo, like they're gonna run a run first offense. Jacobs is gonna have a probably another big year. And we just don't know what the connection with Garoppolo and Adams is going to be. So I think that is a concern as well. I think you're going to agree with this because it's a quarterback. Justin Herbert at the end of the second round is way too early. I don't understand this at all. Like we like to wait on quarterbacks, but if this is like Mahomes at 22, you could like understand it, or Josh Allen at 22. Like Herbert is not that level. So I think that's way too early too. So what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. Even if you're someone who likes the idea of taking quarterback early, which I think is dumb, but yeah, I doesn't make any sense. By the way, where's Jalen Hurts on this list? I don't see.
He's number 17.
Oh, there he is, 17. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's two. There's 3 quarterbacks in the top 17. That's absurd. 4 quarterbacks in the top 18. Yeah, it's just it's too early for any of those in pretty much any format.
What do you think about Pollard? Because I was.
Oh yeah, you mentioned Pollard.
Yeah.
I think he's a great player. I mean, people often were saying that prime Pollard will be better than prime Zeke. I'm like, did you guys remember prime Zeke? Like, you guys, prime Zeke was a remarkable player. Okay, and I hate the Cowboys as much as anybody, but like, come on, that guy was awesome. And even though even Zeke Elliott last year with like, just totally has lost 2 steps, he's still a very good player, like, and has a great nose for the end zone. And so I think sometimes people are talking about Pollard like he's this, not like he's the second coming of LaDainian Tomlinson. I mean, okay, let's slow down, people. He's a very good player. 26. Now the quarterbacks are in this mix, right? So that kind of throws things off a little bit here. But getting Pollard in the late second, early third feels about right to me. Maybe as a slight value. Maybe I would value him as a mid second. And so it seems like you're higher on Pollard. You're saying he's a late first, early second. Sounds like you're saying. Yeah. And I'm saying he's more like a mid second. So we're not way far off. So we're both would agree he's a value, but you probably would value him a little more than I would.
Yeah, I love him this year as an owner of 11 elite Tony Pollard NFTs on Rainmakers. I hope I am right. I would take him over some of these other running backs who are ahead of him. I'd take him over Kenneth Walker. I like Walker for sure, but yeah. I mean, Pollard just I think he's gonna have a huge year. I love Josh Jacobs too. Like, I mean, he the way they use him in that offense is just great. Nick Chubb, like he had like the problem with Chubb is if this is like no catches at all, like he would definitely be near the top, but he just doesn't catch passes. Although you know what, I mean, Kareem Hunt's gone, so maybe that'll change. Actually, now that I think about it, like maybe Chubb's a little underrated now. We'll see if they add anyone in the draft, but they don't have anyone to catch passes really. So maybe Chubb will have a different role this
I
year.
mean, even with that last year, Chubb was the 5th best fantasy
Yeah.
running back, and he's like he's 0.3 of a point average per game behind Austin Eckler. So like, and he's only one fantasy point behind Christian McCaffrey, 1.2 behind Josh Jacobs, and Josh Jacobs, whom I love, I'm a big fan of. His stats are a little skewed because he had one game that 44 fantasy points in week 12. So, and those points count. I mean, if you have him on your squad that week, like I had him in multiple teams, I had him on 3 out of 4 teams last year. I won that week in every league I was in. So it counts. But Josh Jacobs had a lot of, he had a 5-point game, a 5-point game, 5.4. I mean, he got an 8-point game. He got a lot of single digit point games here. So I don't know. Nick Chubb to me is clearly he's worthy of a top 4, top 5 running back. I look at him at number 19. I think that's a pretty good value. I would be willing to take Nick Chubb kind of late first, early second. And the fact that he doesn't catch passes doesn't bother me because that guy is he's a baller, and he doesn't wear gloves, which is awesome.
Yeah, I was thinking more of DraftKings because he's not nearly as good on DraftKings because it's PPR. But yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, the more the more undervalued he is right now. So you're talking about that. By the way, you mentioned that Josh Jacobs game in week 12, and I mentioned Rainmakers before. I was the second place in a contest that week thanks to Josh Jacobs. I lost by 0.01 points. It was Austin Eckler edging me out right at the end. If he had one fewer yard, I would have won the tournament. So that was a big difference there. I'll just say a difference of $80,000. So 1 yard, dude, 1 yard. All right, we had a couple questions from Randy doing a super flex league for the first time. By the way, I've never done a super flex league. Where do you guys see Justin Fields going this year as the top 10 lock in super flex? He's talking about. So Fields right now in this, he's what I saw him. There you go. He's number 28. So that's regular fantasy. Like, I mean, obviously, like I think he's a top 10 lock in super flex, right?
Where would I think where would I rank him overall just amongst quarterbacks? I think that's the question I would ask myself. I'm looking at last year's stats, so I'm not looking at rankings for coming up. But last year's stats, you got Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow. Do I think he's better than any of those guys coming into this year? No. And then it's Geno Smith, and then Fields was actually next. You got it. I mean, he's in super flex. Is he a lock top 10? Probably. I wouldn't say lock, no, but pretty close. I think you're in the ballpark. I guess I didn't realize where he fell. I didn't realize his stats were so good. I don't know why. I'm looking on a per average, per game basis, not total numbers, but on a per game basis, he was the 7th highest scoring fantasy quarterback in typical standard leagues. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, it was like after that. Remember that Thursday night game against the Redskins where it was so bad? Like it was, I forget what the final score was. It was like 13-10. It was just so terrible. It was after that game, the Bears were suddenly like, wait a second, Justin Fields can run, right? Let's have him run. And so like the next game was against the Patriots on Monday night where like Fields went crazy. And that was the first game Fields started going off. I mean, he was incredible after that, but at the end of the year, he started getting hurt because he was running so much. It was absurd. Like I loved it because I had him like, first of all, I had him a lot in Rainmakers, but I also was playing him every single week on DraftKings. And at first it was great. Like I was like cashing every lineup with Fields. It was awesome. But then I think like the first time was that Atlanta game where like he had, I think it was like 23 points in the first half. And I was like, oh man, he's going to go off again. This is great. Like maybe he'll hit 50. And he ended the game with 26. Like he did nothing in the second half because he got hurt and he stopped running. And then he didn't run that much to close out the year. And he was out at the end. So that's the problem with Fields is like when he's running and going nuts, like he's going to win games for you just by himself. But the problem is that he might get banged up. And so like, I think you need a contingency plan if you draft him.
Also when it comes to Superflex, it's just generally, it's interesting that in typical fantasy leagues, quarterbacks are overvalued is in some ways. Um, in superflex leagues, they are that overvaluing happens. It's exponential. Um, and so like quarterback is still a very replaceable position. Um, unless you have a very large, but in superflex, like you can also play a quarterback or a running back in that spot. And so I think sometimes people, if you're in a strict 2 quarterback league, that's a larger league, 12 teams or more. I've played in a strict 2 quarterback league that had 13 teams. It was awful. It was really hard to field with bye weeks and injuries sometimes. But Superflex, I think sometimes still there's a potential that the quarterbacks go so high that you end up having some really good running backs and receivers drop, and in a way that is often silly. And so just be careful you don't overvalue the quarterback in the superflex in a way that's unhelpful to your team.
I once did actually. I said I wasn't in a super flex league, but I actually did a league where we had 2 quarterbacks. But the catch was there were only 6 teams in the league. So like
Yep.
we would start 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 5 receivers, 2 tight ends. It was almost absurd. Like as you would imagine, like the scoring was like 330 to like 300. It was insane. I was like, this is fun at first, but I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this again. So Randy also saying selling Adams in 2023. Yeah, I think so. I don't hate it, but I think he might be in for a downswing. And he also says running backs are horrible. Planning on going receiver, quarterback, first 5 rounds. Got burned last year going running back heavy. The upside just wasn't there. I mean, you could say that. Well, I would say like I think the upside is there. It's just like there's so much downside with the running backs. Like they tend to get hurt a lot. They get hurt more than any other position. You can't count on them staying healthy for a whole year. Someone like Dalvin Cook, he's had only one healthy season, fully healthy season in his career, and he typically goes first 2 rounds. So it's like, by the way, I didn't see Dalvin Cook. Where is he? That's actually he's 41. Okay, so that's a little lower than he usually goes. He usually goes like end first or early second. But yeah, it's like even with him, like someone who's like habitually goes late first, early second. He can't stay healthy for a full year. So just like it just shows how much downside there is to running backs. So I think people like to employ like a 0 running back strategy, which I don't like doing. Like I feel like you should just take the best player available.
Right.
But I think if you if it so happens that like your best player available is receiver, then receiver, then receiver, then tight end, then quarterback, I think you're okay because you can probably skip out on all the injured players just by accident.
Yeah, yeah, I don't to the guy who made that comment. Just because you got burned last time doing something doesn't mean you're going to get burned doing that again. I don't think that's an ideal approach to drafting. You got to you get every year is a new year, and you got to evaluate this year on its own merits. There are lessons to learn from previous seasons, certainly, but to say, oh, a previous position burned me, so I'm going to devalue that position in future years, wholesale. Just I think that's a way to guarantee you'll miss out on some potential values. I went quarterback heavy, running back heavy in several leagues last year. I had Josh Jacobs, I had Christian McCaffrey in some leagues. I had Nick Chubb in pretty much every league. It seemed like I had Miles Sanders in a league. I had Najee Harris in a league. All those guys turned out well. I went pretty running back heavy, and I had Alvin Kamara, I think, in 2 of my 4 leagues. That the injuries weren't great, but on a per game basis, his fantasy scoring was good. So I think the idea that someone would say, I'm going to ignore a position because I got burned previously, I think you're asking for some trouble there.
I was high on Barkley last year. I thought he'd rebound because he had a down year in 2021 because I feel like he kept like creeping down like draft boards and he was going suddenly he was going second round and like I heard so many people go like, wow, he's going so late. This is great value, but he was coming off a torn ACL. But like last year was another year removed from that injury, so I thought he'd bounce back. Something I would do though, if I wouldn't stay away from running backs completely. Like I agree with what Kenny said. Like if your running back is the best player available. Like, don't stay away from him just because he's a running back. But something to keep in mind though is just I would be scared with guys coming off torn ACLs. Now, it's not like a foolproof strategy. Like, we had that 2,000-yard rushing season by Adrian Peterson coming off a torn ACL, which is like insane. But most of the time, running backs and receivers coming off torn ACLs tend to struggle. So like guys this year, like Breece Hall, even though I love Breece Hall, I'm going to love him in 2024 when everyone's down on him after this year. Like Breece Hall's coming off a torn ACL, so I don't trust him. Javonte Williams is another running back I love, but he's coming off a torn ACL. So I would stay away from those two guys, and then like really go ham on them like in 2024, just like in drafts. But yeah, that's what I recommend. Like you could probably gauge like who is like injury prone more than anyone else, and just go from there. But even like someone like Christian McCaffrey scares me because he's missed a lot of time, at least before last year. Now I would not avoid him in the first round, but I would come away from my draft thinking like, man, I have a lot of downside here, but there is definitely upside.
Yeah, I agree. As you said, running backs get hurt. There's question marks there. But in fantasy football, the greatest advantage still, even with all of the evolution of the game over the last 20 to 30 years, if you have a stud running back, you have an advantage over your opponent week in and week out. It's the hardest position to solve in fantasy football. Ironically, it's become pretty close to the easiest position to solve in real football. Sort of a weird divergence there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Randy's saying it's dependent on where I'm drafting. I'd pick 11. Was really kicking myself missing out on Diggs, Hill, Adams, even Kelsey and Najee. Like for Najee and Aaron Jones type picks. Aaron Jones was a huge disappointment. Najee had a fine finish, but he was a disappointment early in the season. The Pittsburgh offensive line just wasn't really good, but it's gonna be better this year. So I think Najee's someone who could bounce back. I think like you can just kind of like pick and choose your spots and try to get underrated players. Like Barkley was a good example last year. I think Najee Harris is a good example this year. He's a really talented player. He's coming off a down year because that offensive line was dreadful. But they added Isaac Seumalo. Some of their younger guys are going to have more experience, and I think they're going to add another lineman in the draft. So I feel like he could have a bounce back season, but his ADP is going to be lower. Kind of curious to where it is, 38. So that's what, like beginning fourth round. I think
good value.
Yeah, that's tremendous value. So yeah, if you want to go like receiver, and then pick up a couple running backs here, like let's see what happens with the draft. But like if you get like Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, go receiver Stevenson Harris. Like I think that's really good.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, I mean, again, it all depends on what's available when you draft. If you're drafting late first round and Tyreek Hill is available, okay, I could see drafting Tyreek Hill at the 11th spot. That makes perfect sense. But if you get to the spot 11 and you're looking between Saquon Barkley and Jalen Waddle. Like don't do that. Don't devalue Barkley just because he's a running back just for the sake of having a receiver. I mean, I think people just, when you get to positions, I'm all about, I want the best player. Just give me the best player and I'll figure out the rest later on.
All right. We're in agreement. So looks like we'll be going after the same players in our leagues. All right. So yeah, that's about it for the football talk. But as usual, I want to end this talking about some TV shows as we are wont to do. So, all right. Well, I wanted to first ask you about the Game of Thrones spinoffs, if you're watching them, and if not, well, first of all, like if not, why not? And if not, also like what else are you watching right now?
No, I'm not watching them. What do you mean, why not? Do you not remember? What, have you forgotten? The North remembers, and I live in the North. I live in Minnesota. And do you not remember the disaster that was? I'm not over it. I don't care what any people, oh, you're bitter. Yes, I'm bitter. I will never forgive HBO for that disaster. Why would I watch that spinoff? I refuse to do it. Sorry.
Well, okay. I felt like you did, and I thought, when that new show came on, I thought, okay, let me give it a shot and see if I like it,
You're a better man
because
than me.
if George R. R. Martin wasn't involved, I would have said, like, screw this, I'm not watching this crap. But the Game of Thrones seasons when George R. R. Martin was there, they were amazing, and George R. R. Martin's involved in the show, so I thought, like, this has got to be good, right? Because he's there now. The problem is, like, maybe he leaves again, and then the show will go to crap again. Like, that could definitely happen. But as long as he's involved in the show, I think it's gonna be really good. And the first season was really good. I would say the first episode is kind of disappointed. And in fact, I almost stopped watching, but my friend Bodyburner was like, "Oh, well, second episode is a lot better." I'm like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot," and it was a lot better. And like the rest of the first season was I thought it was pretty terrific. It wasn't like Game of Thrones type level, but it was a lot better. Like it couldn't be nothing could be worse than those final couple of seasons of Game of Thrones. But it was
So
a
bad.
lot better. It was a lot better though. So I would recommend it. And I should probably know the answer to this, but I assume you're going to say no. But there's apparently going to be a Jon Snow spinoff where they're going to be doing Jon Snow later on. If George R. R. Martin's involved in that, and the show's going to be called Snow, where do you imagine yourself watching that?
That one could suck me in. There's a
Okay.
potential. Is it going to be a spinoff of like Jon Snow's life after Game of Thrones, kind of deal,
Yeah,
in the future?
yeah,
Yeah, I could be suckered into that. It's possible.
yeah,
The last two seasons of Game of Thrones, particularly the last few episodes, were as bad as an ending a television show could have as I've ever seen. Um, in fact, you could argue it's the worst ever, because most TV shows that are bad or mediocre don't even make it. They just get canceled by the studio, and they never really even get to have a real series finale, right? TV shows that have a long run, that actually have a quality, promoted series finale, usually are better shows. And so we've never seen a show be this, at least that I know of. We've never seen a television show be this popular, this good, and crash and burn at the end epically the way Game of Thrones did. Is there maybe I'm wrong, but I can't think of an example in my lifetime that was anything close to that.
I'm trying to think, and we did a top 10 TV show list a couple years ago, and actually it was like 4 years ago now, by now, or 5 years ago. Um, and like I was thinking about some of the shows that I had at on that list, and like you had like Lost, which is like the ending was not great. And like people didn't seem to not like the ending. I actually thought it was good. I actually thought
I
the
liked it.
like it could have been better, but I thought it was a fine ending. Battlestar Galactica, I love the ending. Such a crazy twist. I would highly recommend that show. Um, what else is there? Star Trek Next Generation. I mean, is one of the best finales I think of all time. And so I can't think of another show that had a terrible ending. Like The Wire season 5 was not good, but it was still so much better
Yeah.
than Game of Thrones 7 and 8. So yeah, I can't think. Oh, what's it called? I'm trying to think of some other shows, but yeah, I think you're right. I can't think of another TV show that just crashed and burned like that.
I don't want to reward them by watching anything they come out with. I was actually angry at HBO altogether. I hadn't watched much HBO at all, and then I recently got sucked into two HBO shows that I'll talk about in a second. So I have forgiven HBO.
Okay, well, I don't
Maybe,
know.
maybe I'll watch the Snow a spinoff.
I'm excited for it. I want to see what happens. I know Kit Harrington's a huge Game of Thrones fan, the book series, and I heard that he was really disappointed with the ending too. So I like that he's on quote unquote our side, where it just was really bad. It's amazing how it like tailspin, like they eat like even the small things like that Starbucks cup.
Yeah.
like in the background, like they just it seemed like they were just in a rush to end it because the two guys wanted to go to Star Wars, and it turned out like they were fired from that too, or they were let go. I forget what happened exactly, but yeah, I guess like karma like really came around. So you mentioned two HBO shows you like. I'm kind of curious to what they are.
Yeah, there are a couple shows recently, um, and then I'll give you my quick honorable mention. So a couple years ago, I started watching Parks and Rec, and Parks and Rec is in the style, is in a category of television shows that I typically don't watch. I don't typically watch pure comedies, sitcoms. A couple of my roommates, you know, my late 20s and early 30s were all guys that loved like The Office, Arrested Development. They loved, there's some shows on the WB that they really were into. Like, these kind of ridiculous, what I would say are ridiculous kind of sitcom, and I think they're all dumb. Like I'm fiercely judgmental of people who like those kind of shows, and I just think those people are like beneath me, ontologically less valuable than me. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I'm being ridiculous. And so when I got married, my wife was like, "Oh, we should watch Parks and Rec," and I'm like, "Really? I married someone who likes? I married one of those people in that category that I dislike? Oh my gosh, this is gonna be terrible. Oh my, what did I sign up for?" And she's like, "Come on, you got to watch it." I'm like, "No, this is gonna be stupid, and I'm gonna feel dumber, and I'm gonna dislike my wife. Like this is all bad." I was 100% wrong. I love Parks and Rec. It is so witty. The writing is so clever. I literally laugh out loud at least once every episode. And the characters are just so endearing and ironic in weird, ridiculous ways. They kind of mock culture in such really interesting ways. It's a really great show. So when we first got married, we watched the first 5 seasons, and then we got busy. And so we just recently got Peacock app. And because, you know, I sign up for an app, binge watch everything in 1 month, and then cancel. So I'm doing that with the Peacock app right now, and they've got the last 3 seasons of Parks and Rec. So right now, my wife and I are watching the last 3 seasons of Parks and Rec, and just I love that television show. Anyway, it's not like a great show, but it's just like a feel good. Anyway, are you a Parks and Rec fan?
So we watched the first 2 seasons, and I was not impressed. Now, maybe I have to ask you this: like, does it get better after season 2? Because I described Parks and Rec the first 2 seasons as The Office with no charm. Like it just seemed like each character was like a bland version of a character on The Office. Like Leslie
Oh,
Knope
that's
was like a
funny.
much worse Michael Scott, you know. I
I
don't know all the characters' names because it was a while ago, but I remember just I was like, okay, this is like some parts are funny, like this is fine, but like I was like, I'd rather watch The Office, even though I've seen it before. But I
Interesting.
heard from people that it gets better after season 2, and we don't have Peacock app, so we can't watch beyond season 2. I guess I could just get it, but lazy.
Uh, I man, that's funny. I had the exact opposite thought. I thought Michael Scott is so annoying, and Leslie
Really?
Knope is so much more endearing to me.
Okay.
That's yeah. I don't know that it gets dramatically better, maybe a little bit, but if you didn't like season 2, I doubt that you're gonna like the show much at all. That's
Interesting.
maybe I
Um,
don't know. It's been a while. I mean, it's been a couple of years since I've watched those seasons, so I don't remember there being a dramatic difference though between. I feel like there was a difference in terms of season 2 being better than season 1, but I don't know that season 3 was dramatically better than season 2.
okay. That's what I heard. But I don't know.
Mhm.
I always wanted to finish it because I heard like so many good things from people, and I guess I always wanted to give it a shot. But like I said, like the first 2 seasons was like it was just okay. I thought it was just a fine show. And I thought like Leslie Knope was just trying too hard to be like Michael Scott. Like it just seemed like it's just like a bad facsimile, you know. Um, I just didn't like it. Yeah, you know how you had like that. I forget her name, but like that girl, that younger girl in The Office,
Mhm.
Parks and Rec. She's like the Ryan in The Office, but like Ryan was so funny in The Office. Like, and it just seemed like I said, it was just like every character was like a bad knockoff of someone else in The Office. But that I don't
Oh man, that hurts my soul.
know.
All right, so that's not really one of my top shows. It's just kind of like a
Okay.
fun, feel good. the three shows that I have watched in 2020, the last few months, 2022 and the 2023, that I have thoroughly thought were excellent. And here are my top three. Number 3, Succession on HBO. It took me a bit to kind of warm up to the show. I watched the first few episodes, didn't love it, and then I kind of liked it. And I got to the end of season 1, I decided to go back and rewatch season 1, and I loved it. And the main character, Kendall, he's not a strong enough character. There's not enough depth to his character. He's kind of blasé, and some of the actor's not great. But his dad in the show. Have you watched the show at all?
I've seen ads for it, and I'm like, I should probably watch that. So I like that you're bringing it up. Like, maybe I should start.
The dad is really a great character, and the early episodes they don't give enough. He's not the main guy. He's kind of like the secondary character. They're trying to make this guy Kendall, his son. He's kind of like the main guy, but that kind of switches in season 2 where the dad becomes like the main character, and he like this should have been all along. This should have been the main character. So season 3 is very good. And right now, season 4, the final season, is just being released. So I'm watching that and enjoying that. My second favorite show of 2022, early 2023, is The Last of Us, which I know has been lots of people have watched. I don't know if you've seen it or not. And I never played the game. I know a lot of people I know, like, part of the greatness of the show is that it was that it mimics the game so much. But I really enjoyed the story. I think it's a more realistic version ish of The Walking Dead, and I really liked The Walking Dead, but it just got old after a while. I felt like, and maybe this show will get old quickly. Maybe by season 2, I'll be done with it, like I was Walking Dead. But I liked it. I liked that they explained the way they explain the science behind it. It's like, oh, you can actually feels kind of realistic, like it could happen. And then the relationship between between the guy and the girl is really sweet. And then throughout the season, I don't want to spoil anyone who hasn't seen it, but she's kind of snapped. You can tell something happens in her. She experiences this trauma, and she was almost killed, and you can just tell something breaks in her. So I really enjoyed the Last of Us. That's kind of my second one. Have you seen that? What do you think of it?
I actually have the game. I haven't played it yet, just because I have like a lot of games in my queue right now. And I might play that soon. And I was like, I always wanted to play the game first and then watch the show. But then I heard some stuff about the show, and I'm like, now I don't want to watch the show. Some people mention episode 3. It's like not the most egregious thing, but it's like, why is that in here? Like, it just feels like they're just doing that. Just actually, I know a reason why. I know exactly why. Like, stuff like that. Like, Hollywood gives like tax exempt status if they have that certain stuff in shows. Yeah. Which is like makes me not want to watch it. And then my wife brought up something about the main character girl. I don't want to get into details here, but I don't know. Like, it was just like kind of off-putting. So I don't know. I just kind of like lost interest in that show, and now I don't know if I'm going to watch it. But I am going to play the game, and if I love the game, I might watch the show. Just not as excited as it was when it was first released. But yeah, maybe I'll give it a chance.
There's clearly ideological agendas informing component. Not a lot. I think it's mostly minor through the first season, with the exception of kind of one chunk of an episode. Yeah, and that's annoying. I'm like, I guess it's America in 2023. And then the number one show, though, and there's a pretty significant chasm between this one and the others. This show, if we were to do a top 10 of all time, this show would make my top 10 of all time. Maybe my top 5 or 7. Better Call Saul.
Oh yeah, amazing.
Better Call Saul. Now I think I heard, you might have been the one I think said, I think I've even heard more than one person say this, that they thought Better Call Saul was better than Breaking Bad. Was that you? Did you say that?
I said at times I thought Better Call Saul was better. I think overall, I think Breaking Bad is better. But and Bryan Cranston, it's pretty tough. Although Cranston made an appearance in Better Call Saul. But yeah, Better Call Saul was just fantastic, and just not binge watching the show like I did the first couple of seasons of Breaking Bad, and then I joined in live. Better Call Saul I watched like weekly, and it was like, oh man, like the hour's over. It's kind of like one of those shows, like where you check the clock and you're like, oh no, it's 9:40. Like we only have 20 more minutes of this. I remember doing that with Game of Thrones, and I did that with Better Call Saul. Just an amazing show. I love the character of Saul Goodman, Jimmy McGill. And like I usually hate prequels. Like and like people might be thinking, I don't want to watch a prequel. And I'm usually like, I'm definitely in that camp. Like, I'm like, I don't need to see how like the origins of these characters are explained, but like the way they did it was just so amazing. And it's not like it was one character in the show, and like I guess they delved into other characters as well who were in Breaking Bad, but still like the origins of Jimmy McGill and like how what he underwent with his brother and stuff like that, and how he's kind of like Walter White, where he just got progressively worse. Like in the first season, he does some sketchy things for sure, but like he just kept like going down the slippery slope, like getting worse and worse, and you get to see how Saul Goodman came to be. It's just fantastic. I loved it.
It's yeah, it would be yeah. I don't know that it's better than Breaking Bad. If anyone watching it doesn't, I mean, it's the prequel to Breaking Bad, but it's really close. And I can, if someone said they like Better Call Saul more than Breaking Bad, I can understand that. And my wife has not seen Breaking Bad, but she did watch Better Call Saul with me, or most of it, and she really liked it. It was interesting though. My wife tends to not like darker kind of postured shows, or like kind of the tenor. And Breaking Bad has a little more of a darker feel to it. And Better Call Saul starts off much more lighthearted. There's a lot more levity in the earlier episodes, and then as his character progresses down, more becoming more unethical, the show feels darker and heavier as time goes on. I think they did a good job of kind of matching that. Well, Breaking Bad is sort of like that for the bulk of the series, right? There's that darker feel. And so I get the sense that people like my wife who would like Better Call Saul, but would not like Breaking Bad, actually, where most of us would say, if you like Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad is a step up. So there might be people out there that even appreciate Better Call Saul more than Breaking Bad if they don't like that darker feel television show.
I'm actually curious to hear what your wife has to say after watching Breaking Bad, because people watched almost everyone watched Breaking Bad first and then Better Call Saul. So like maybe they just kind of romanticize Breaking Bad more. But if you watch Better Call Saul and then Breaking Bad, like maybe it's just different. Like maybe she'd like Better Call Saul better. I'm kind of curious what she thinks about the show.
Yeah, we'll get to it at some point.
Okay. Yeah, I want to. Okay, so my top three, and I want to give an honorable mention as well. My honorable mention is Boy Meets World. Now, this is a show I watched a long time ago when I was a kid, but I'm rewatching it.
The original episodes?
Yeah, the original. Not Girl Meets World. Girl Meets World was utter garbage, except for a couple episodes were really good of Girl Meets World, but like it was terrible for the most part. The main character girl was just awful. Sorry if you're listening, but I don't want to like hurt her feelings or anything. But she was just as bad. Her sidekick friend was pretty impressive. I thought she was a really good actress, but the main character girl, I thought she just ruined it for me. Plus, Corey Matthews as a teacher, he was just he lost me. I don't know. But the original Boy Meets World, I'm rewatching it weekly, and it's because of what is it? Let me pull this up real fast. It is called the Pod Meets World podcast. So the actors who played Sean Hunter, Eric Matthews, and Topanga, they host a podcast every single week called Pod Meets World, and they break down every episode and they talk about like the inner workings of everything and like the crazy stuff behind the scenes. And like they just give like facts, like, hey, like in this scene, like this so and so happened. Like Eric said, like I don't know if you remember this, you might have seen this a long time ago, but like the episode where Corey thought he was turning into a werewolf. Eric he actually brought up like a water bowl for Corey, and he spilled it all over himself, and he's like, well, that happened. And like I was like, well, they should have kept that. It would have been so funny. And then like Topanga was talking about how the first Topanga she got fired after one day, but the first Topanga actually turned out to be the weird creepy girl from The Ring. So I thought that was pretty funny. She's like a contortionist. That's how she can do that weird crawl. So like this is like I find like the I usually don't listen to like these podcasts, but like I find it interesting, and so I go along with them. So like I'll watch the show, I'll watch the episode that they're going to talk about, and then I'll listen to their podcast, and I think it's awesome. Like I'm having a blast.
It's so good.
Yeah. And it's like it's great to like watch George Feeney, who's still alive. He's like 93. The actor who played him. And it's great to watch him and like a young Corey Matthews, who he really carried the show. He was like a stand-up comedian basically in the first 2 seasons. Yeah, I love it. So my top three, and this is like three should probably be an honorable mention as well, because like the show's not great either. But I'm watching How I Met Your Father. I don't know if you saw How I Met Your Mother. Did you ever see that?
I saw a handful of episodes over the years.
Okay, I loved How I Met Your Mother. I thought it was one of my favorite shows. The final season though was terrible. It just ended on a bad note. They spent the whole last season on a wedding. And I guess spoiler alert here, but the whole last season was about a wedding, and in the final episode they got divorced like 10 minutes into it. And it's like why did we spend wasting our time on this stupid wedding about two characters who didn't belong together? It was just terrible. And then like, the way that they talked about who the mother was and like what happened to her, and then like the last scene was just awful. I guess like the question you asked before, was there a great show that had a tailspin like Game of Thrones? This is not as bad as Game of Thrones, but it was pretty bad. The final season and episode were just terrible. But I am watching I'm watching How I Met Your Father, and I'll say like I was really down on the first season, like especially the first episode. I thought it was so corny, like a lot of corny jokes. I just didn't like it, and I almost stopped watching it. But I'm like, I'll just keep doing. I'll just keep going. Season two I'm on season two, and season two reminds me of How I Met Your Mother. Like a lot of the same jokes. It feels like they got the writers back. I don't know that for sure, but it feels like the writing is a lot different, and it's like familiar to what How I Met Your Mother was in its peak. So I'm really enjoying the second season right now.
Nice.
Okay.
I never watched that show, but I've seen a few episodes here and there.
Okay, yeah, I'd recommend How I Met Your Mother. I thought it was great until the final season. Number two, okay, so like these two shows I love. Number two was The Morning Show. It's on Apple TV. It's with Jennifer Aniston and what's her name? I'll have to look it up. I forget her name. So it's about a morning show where Reese Witherspoon and by the way, Steve Carell's in it. I had no idea he was in it, but he's in it as well. So it's about Steve Carell, that character. He gets Me Too'd, and so he's like the I don't know who the primary morning host is in real life, but he's like that guy. But he gets Me Too'd and he gets kicked off the show. And like they try to find a replacement, and like there's like a lot of drama going on. It's kind of like a Game of Thrones like type of deal where like people are like vying for power. The main dude on the show who's like trying to take over as CEO of the company, I think he's terrific, like that actor. Like he even says on the show, like he's like I'm the Cheshire Cat, like grinning, and I was like, yeah, he is like the Cheshire Cat, like that's what he reminds me of. He's like the Littlefinger of this world, and he's just a great actor and a great character, and like all the characters are awesome. Now season two, they kind of there's one storyline that almost I almost want to say it jumps the shark, where like it's kind of so stupid that like it made season two, it made it like a little sour for me. But there were some episodes of season two, especially the Steve Carell stuff, that were just great. So I would recommend The Morning Show. So maybe when you get finished with Peacock, you can go to Apple TV and binge watch that.
Nice. Well, we're gonna have Apple TV in a couple months, because once Ted Lasso has released all their episodes, we'll get Ted Lasso. I didn't mention as well. That's from 2021, but season 3 just came out. We'll be watching that in a few months here.
Okay. The last one was Alice in Borderland. Now I know you watched Squid Game. That's my recommendation, and you loved it, right?
It was very good. Crazy, weird, but good.
I think Alice in Borderland is better. I think it's a better version of that. It's the same sort of deal, but like I would say the Squid Game. I'd say Squid Game like could actually happen in real life. Like, would you agree? Like, it would be difficult, but like I could imagine people like down on their luck, like really wanting money and like going to this island and trying to compete. Now, I think people would find out and shut it down, but like I think it could happen for a couple years. Like, would you agree with that? Like,
I mean, I should maybe I should not mention a one Mr. Epstein.
right.
So,
Well,
do I believe it can happen in real life? Of course, I believe that.
well, I don't think like they were like I don't think anyone was killed. Like I don't know.
I should not say. I should say minimal.
Okay, all right, that's fair. All right, so there have been islands where weird things happen for sure. But like so with Alice in Borderland, basically the premise is you have three guys, three teenagers. They're probably like 18. They're kind of like up to no good. They're like spray painting something in the first episode. Cops see them. This is in Japan, by the way. They run from the cops and they go into the subway, into like an actual subway, not the sandwich shop. They go they go into a restroom and they hide out in a stall. And suddenly the lights go out and like it's all quiet. They're like, what's going on? And they leave the stall and like there's no one in the subway anymore. And they go out, there's no one in the streets anymore. It's all vacant. And they see a sign for like, here's a game. The game starts at like 8 o'clock or whatever. And so they go to this game and they're given phones and they have to play a game. And if they lose in this game, they die. It's kind of like Squid Game. But I think the games are a lot cooler. Like there's a game of hide and seek where they're in this apartment complex and they're running from a guy with a gun and he's the seeker and like they're trying to hide from him for a certain amount of time. There's another game where it's like it's called like The Witch, I think. And basically what happens is they're in this hotel and this girl is dead they find this girl dead on the floor and they're like the voice goes you have to find the person who killed this girl. You have to throw them into a pyre outside. Like this game ends when the person who committed the crime dies in the pyre. If you don't find the person within a certain amount of time, you all die. So like as you can imagine, like people join into groups and they start throwing people into the pyre like crazy, like hoping it's the person, and so like it's just like chaos ensues. And basically what happens is like each game is a card. Like a game would be like a 3 of clubs or a 6 of spades, and like the higher the number is, the tougher the game is. And like spade, like the suits are all different games. Like spade is like physical. I think like club is it's like psychological. Like diamond is like teamwork, and like heart is like I forget what the other ones are, but once you beat a game you get a card. And like throughout the first season they're trying to combine all the cards and they get like 2 through 10 of everything, but they can't find any jacks, queens, or kings. And like in the second season suddenly the jacks, kings, and queens show up and like they're even tougher games. It's really, really cool show. I highly recommend it.
Alice in Borderland.
Yeah. I would say that the acting isn't as great as Squid Game, but the acting's still good. But I think the overall universe and the actual games are better than Squid Game. So it's super intense. A lot of twists and turns. I love the show. My wife and I just can't get enough of it. I think we have 2 more episodes in season 2. But it's really cool. I highly recommend it.
Nice. All right. Well, it'll be on the list. We enjoy Squid Games, although my wife does think your taste in television shows is weird because you also recommended what's the show
Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks. That's right.
One of the best shows of all time.
My wife's like, Walt thinks this is one of the best shows of all time.
Oh, dude, it's how do you not think that? It was amazing. And like this was another show where they had the first 2 seasons back in 91 or 91 or something like that. And the ending was awesome. And then they did a 3rd season because one of the characters said to the other, I'll see you in 25 years. And this guy planned it all along. He's like, we're going to come back in 25 years and do a season 3. It's like ridiculous. And so like they had all the characters come back who were still alive. And the ending of season 3 was awesome too. Like I thought it was incredible. So it would quite comment here. Zachary says lost, crash and burn at the end. I don't know. I didn't think it was a great ending, but I thought it was pretty solid.
Once you understood what was happening, I thought it was fine.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? A lot of people didn't get it because I heard people say, "Oh, they were dead the whole time." It's like no. Only in the flash sideways of season 6 were they dead the whole time.
Right.
Because that was in the way future. Might have been 100 years or a couple hundred years in the future because, like, again, spoilers, but like Hurley becomes the new Jacob,
right?
And so he has eternal life until he decides to pass on his gift. And so Hurley theoretically could have been alive for hundreds of years, like Jacob was. Right. So we don't know how much in the future it was, but that flash sideways was way in the future after Hurley was, you would assume he was the last one to pass on. And I would love to see a Lost spinoff, like brand new characters, but same island. And like, maybe you bring back Hurley because he's the new Jacob. And like, you don't see him until the end. Like he's like this mythical guy. And like Ben Linus is still there too, helping him out. So I would love to see Hurley and Ben Linus come back. And then, just new people come to the island.
Yeah. I thought it was great. There are certain shows that end in a certain way that people are like bothered by it. I'm just like, actually, that's a fine ending. I mean, you got to end it somehow. It's hard to come up with a great ending for a great show. It's not an easy task. So
yeah,
I don't know. People complain about the Sopranos ending, and I thought actually the Sopranos ending ended as fitting as it could have for what the show was.
That was another one where people were like, "Oh, what happened? The screen turned black," and they talked about it. Like, who said that to Tony? He was I don't know if it was Paul.
Him and Bobby Bacala were talking about it when they were fishing.
Oh, right, yeah. He was like, it all goes to black, right?
Yep.
Like when you die, like they literally said what happened.
I think it's an interesting thing. And then in the diner, there were multiple people there that had reasons to kill Tony. That were in the diner.
Yeah.
So,
I would just love to know which one it was. And like, but I don't know. I guess that's something you'll never know, and like Tony will never know, obviously. So,
right.
But yeah, that was that's actually something I binge watched during the football season was The Sopranos, because I had never seen it because I got the gifts, the DVD gift sets from my dad. And we never watched it because he's like, "Oh, watch it later," and then eventually moved out, and so I never had a chance. And I thought like one day I'd watch it with him, and then I just had nothing to watch. And my wife was like, "Why don't you watch The Sopranos?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Like I'm never gonna watch this with my dad. So I finally watched it, and yeah, it was. So it's kind of like fresh in my mind. Because I remember people like being disappointed by that blacked out ending, and like just watching it, I guess I knew what it would be in advance. But like when they talked about it on that boat, I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's what happens."
Yep. Yeah. There was one other moment where they're foreshadowing. I can't remember. There's one other moment in season 6 where they're foreshadowing the eventual demise. It becomes obvious. Oh, you know what happened. He got shot and he got killed, and the whole show is from his perspective. So I still think I would say The Sopranos might be the best show of all time. It's still at the top of my list. The Wire is in competition, but The Sopranos is still man, that the writing, the depth of character development is not like none other.
I think what you're thinking of was Silvio. Remember, he was in the restaurant and like someone got shot, and like he's like, I had no idea what happened, and then suddenly I was like, and then I think he brought it up too. He's like, I guess you don't know, like when it happens right away,
right. He made a comment something like, yeah, you're just you're just living you're just looking at the menu and just doing the regular. He makes this comment like, oh, you're just doing regular things. You're in a restaurant, about to order food, and all of a sudden you're gone.
Yeah. A fantastic show. Definitely in the top 10. Well, we'll have to do a list of other TV shows, like like maybe we'll do like worst endings for good shows or something like that, or most disappointing. I don't know. We'll come up with something in the future. So I guess we're past where I thought we'd end, but it was great talking about TV shows with you as always.
Excellent. Anyone still listening to this, Mazel tov to you.
No, we have some people listening.
Come on, let's go.
I know it's awesome. It's almost midnight here on the East Coast. I guess if you're on the West Coast, it's 9 o'clock, but it was kind of more normal. But I'm up until like 6 a.m. anyway. I imagine you want to go to bed, so I'll let you go. Do you have anything to plug?
No, I'm trying to live regular life. I'm just trying to be a regular person, just trolling people on Twitter. Nothing special, nothing happening.
I love trolling people on Twitter. Like people block me all the time. Sarah Spain blocked me a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was pretty funny what happened there. Maybe I think I actually wrote about it in Jerks of the Week. But anyway, yeah, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. We have a link in the description for the merch store. All that would help us out a lot. Kenny, thanks again for coming on. We'll have to get you on again in the near future. So yeah, this is the WalterFootball.com After Dark show. I'll talk to you guys